Well, I would like to share with you about my and Pastor Brandon's trip to Africa, to the Democratic Republic of Congo last year in September 2016. We flew off to firstly to Rwanda, to Kigali. It's a 30-hour flight to get there, and after we got there we had to take a taxi for something like 6 hours driving through the roads to get to Bukavu on the eastern side of the DRC. And we got there at the border just about midnight, and we stayed overnight at the border of Rwanda. Then early next morning we went across, and our head pastor over there, Pastor Mapia, met us, and he was sharing with us some of the things that was happening, because when we went into the country, it was in a period of some significant unrest, because the president was holding on to power when he should have passed it on. So, and he was telling us that actually just that week 2 pastors were killed. They were killed by the soldiers because the soldiers wanted to take their money and mobile phones, but the pastors refused and they just shot them dead. So that was the kind of situation, environment that we were in. So when we got through the border, we were all very careful about what we were doing, how we traveled, how we interacted with the police and the army, because unfortunately there's a lot of corruption happening in the nation. Well, on the first day, immediately when we went there in the morning, we got involved in the training for pastors. We ran a training for 3 days for pastors, and there were more than 40 pastors and several other leaders as well that came along, and it was a fantastic time. It was just amazing to see their heart, their passion to learn, and some of these pastors came from very far. Some had to walk all the way. Some of them walked 2 days, and even sleeping on the side of the road just to make it for the conference, for the training. And so during that time, we taught them many different things. We taught them about leadership. We taught them about planting churches. We taught them about how to help their people. And as part of the training, Pastor Brandon did some training to teach them how to pray for people. And it was just an amazing time as he did that. And some of the pastors, they themselves were healed by the power of God. So it was really exciting and to see what was happening. And so all the pastors, they were so encouraged, they were inspired, they were equipped in a better way after this time. Now, the nation of Democratic Republic of Congo is very poor. They're one of the poorest nations in the world. In terms of their per capita income, it's probably the lowest 5 nations in the world. And so the environment we were in, it was very challenging at many times. Where we held the conference, it was really a little building, one of our church, and it has been built, most of it is built by hand. There are no carpets. The concrete is very basic that they place on the floor. It's cracking, it's falling apart. The church windows often have no panes, no glass in them. And the church itself is situated right in the middle of a slum area. There is no road to get to the church itself. We had to walk on the mud. We had to walk on little paths, little more than mud buns. And so we walked through drains and all kinds of different things to get there. You'll be able to see some of the pictures. And also as we talked to the pastors, like one of my interpreters who was faithfully interpreting for us throughout the whole time, I was asking him, as we were having a very simple lunch that had been cooked by the people there during the conference, and I asked him, so what do you normally have for breakfast? And he said to me, well, he normally doesn't eat breakfast. So I was curious. I asked him, I said, oh, is that because you are on a diet or because you just don't like breakfast? And he said, well, actually he doesn't have breakfast most times because he simply cannot afford to have breakfast. Just amazing. And when we talked to the pastors, we were asking questions like, how do you keep in touch with one another because of the distances and because almost none of them own any cars? Do you call one another? Do you email? And the thing we found is most of the pastors do not even have access to internet. In fact, a significant proportion of those pastors do not even own a phone, no mobile phone. And so this is the kind of situation. They're working in very difficult situations in significant lack. But what's amazing is their passion, their dedication, their willingness to make so much sacrifice for the sake of the kingdom. We also had opportunity, besides the training, to preach and teach in a number of their churches. They brought us to their central church in Bukavu, and where we shared and we ministered in one of their large prayer meetings. But even then, in this little hall that they had, it went on until sunset. And the thing was, they tried to save money by not switching on the light. So there was no light in the whole meeting. And when the sun came down, it was so dark, we couldn't read our Bibles. I brought my tablet along, so I was able to, but it was very difficult for even my interpreter. And another place we went to the first church building that they ever had, which Pastor Mapia himself started that church. And we went to that church where there's another pastor now that's in charge. And again, I shared a message, we ministered there. It was just a wonderful time. And then we went to this pastor's house, which was nearby. He had rented a little house. And it really is in a slum area too. It's got just very basic corrugated walls and roof, a single story. And when we went inside, there was no electricity. We had to switch on our mobile phones for light or bring a torchlight. And it really shocked me to see that the ceiling of that house was made of recycled cardboard. That's the kind of environment that they live in a lot of places in DRC. And then one day they also brought me to a hillside church, and we had to climb, trek up the hill. It was quite a trek on just dirt paths, and I was like, oh wow, it wasn't easy climbing up. But we finally got there, and we got there just before the evening. The sun began to set, and again there was no electricity. It was just a wooden structure made out of trimmings from trees, branches, and they made the whole structure. And right in the middle of my preaching, I felt the whole ground shook, and I was like, what's happening? This hill is not very stable. It shook maybe for 10 seconds. But I continued preaching, and we ministered, we prayed for people, and God moved and touched many people's lives in that time. And finally we went back in the dark. Again, we had to use torchlights and trek our way down the hill, and then finally when we got back. But the next day I discovered there was actually a major earthquake that happened in that area that affected a number of nations. I did not realize. So there I was, preaching right in the middle of an earthquake. What an experience. We also preach in a wedding, and it's just interesting to see how they conduct their weddings. Again, it was another of the church in the countryside on a hill, a small little building where you would probably sit 80 people, 90 people, but they squeezed 200 people in there for the wedding. So it was just interesting, a wonderful cultural experience for us to participate in the wedding, to share a message, to pray for the young couple. And then finally on Sunday we went to one of the largest church in the country, and again it was still a very basic church building, even though it was large enough to sit 300-400 people. But the doors and windows are nothing more than just the openings. There was no actual doors or window panes. So that's some of the challenges in that nation. But they're believing God, they continue to serve the Lord. Can I ask that we pray for them? Because there's so much needs, there's so much poverty, and yet the gospel is so desperately needed in that nation. So many people are lost. There's so much suffering and corruption and all kinds of challenges in that nation. But God is doing amazing things. In just the last year alone, this group of pastors that we have, they have planted 15 new churches. This is the highest number of churches they have ever planted in the entire history of their church planting. So God is doing amazing things, but we need to pray for these leaders, the pastors, and for their people, and believe for God's hand, God's grace to be upon them. It has been a tremendous journey for Pastor Brennan and myself, and we've been so inspired, we've been so challenged, and as well stretched during that time. It's always tremendous when we go forth, when we step out in faith and we serve God, and just to see what God can do when we trust Him. God bless you.